Tired of being the bottleneck in your business? Stop doing it all for yourself. Document all of those repetitive tasks that eat up your precious time so you can grow your team and your business. As the CEO and founder of SweetProcess, Owen McGab Enaohwo helps enable company executives and their employees to collaborate together to quickly document and or improve their standard operating procedures, processes, and policies. Owen has many strengths and will help you level up in these areas: negotiation, business planning, operations management, and business development. He is also going to share how your employees can streamline this documentation process, and how to use the procedures they document to scale your business, organize workflow, and increase activity while cultivating a winning culture. Get excited because he's going to share these procedures to properly delegate the repetitive tasks so you can do more on your end of the business and help growing become a little easier for you. And since we're joined today by an experienced CEO with a history of working in the internet industry, I thought this week's Spotlight story should resonate that a bit. And at the halfway point of today's show, we'll go over the journey of Josh Abramson, the founder of many companies. And the article is called Founder of a $6 billion company came away with nothing, and he's okay with it. So I'm excited to get Owen's take on it. But before all that, Owen, why did you become an entrepreneur? What led you into entrepreneurship?
So first of all, with that kind of intro, I think I want to listen to myself now. Thanks, Vincent. So
Yeah.
why did I become an entrepreneur? I think it's kind of an internal thing where when you realize that you're working for somebody, and then you realize that this is not cutting it because you feel like you could bring more to the table, and as a result of owning your own business and stuff, you can actually have more impact. Then you realize that, hey, maybe working for somebody is not the way to go. And to be honest, most people that I follow who in some way or the other, through their efforts, are leaving some kind of legacy or some impact in people's lives that's lasting, there's always some form of entrepreneurship business behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why one of the reasons that being an entrepreneur makes sense. But not only that, being able to control how you work, your time, your focus, and all that. To a large extent, if you are an entrepreneur, you can do that. It's not going to be easy because it's never easy, but that's the role you signed up for, is to go through the hardship and all that stuff, so that you get, at the end of the whole thing, you get that success, that freedom, that legacy, that whatever you're trying to actually achieve.
You can go into entrepreneurship trying to achieve anything. Well said. Everyone's path is different, and a lot of us, we start having this entrepreneurial mindset in our current positions. We feel like we can do more than just the tasks we're being delegated. And there comes our own company. And lucky enough to carry this show on now, almost 3 years of weekly interviews with amazing guests just like Owen. He's kicked us off. And with that, welcome back to That Entrepreneur Show. Thank you all for tuning in to another show. My name is Vincent A. Lancy, and I am excited to bring on Owen. Such an incredible history. I got to research all he's done, and now he's got his passion project here. And I think he's just getting started too, after having to talk to him a little bit before the show. He's very ambitious. SweetProcess is doing things that make your life easier, especially as an entrepreneur if you have employees. And I'm excited as I start to grow my company more now with the TikTok employee, the illustrators. I need to learn how to be better, do better, because I believe the learning never stops unless you're ready to quit. You always have to keep learning. And as you know, my story, quitting is never an option. But I think we should start off the show by helping our audience here. Owen, what is one of your greatest lessons learned in entrepreneurship?
So one of the things I think that I want to leave with the listeners is, as an entrepreneur, you are actually the leader of the company. But when people think leader, they think like, oh, I'm the boss, my way or the highway. But the reality is that you are the the person who's supposed to be the chief cheerleader, the chief person who's serving people to achieve the best outcome in whatever role they are. And sometimes that might mean being able to help them carry their bag so that they can get to where they need to get to. So if you have that mindset of you being an entrepreneur, is first of all, you're solving a problem for your customers, right? And hence they pay you. And then your employees, you are helping them in whatever way or whatever to make them shine in their role so that they can do their best for your customers. So a lot of times is you really being a servant, more of a servant leadership kind of thing, So that is one advice I have for people. And another thing as an entrepreneur, you need to as a CEO, you need to learn how to delegate tasks. But I think the best way of delegating tasks too, it comes from you actually being able to go in front and learn that task yourself. Because you don't necessarily need to know all the details, but at least know the concepts, know the general framework, so that when you delegate, you have some kind of standpoint from which you can justify the work being delivered. So yes, you're going to trust and verify and also give them the opportunity to shine their work. But if you don't know to a large extent how the work is going to be done, or to a large extent, how to achieve the goals with that role, because you've never done it, it becomes hard for you to measure the success that they're delivering. So be willing at certain points, as a matter of fact, most times, to roll up your sleeve, go there, learn how it's done so that you can replace yourself with somebody who might be better to do the work.
I love that. And I think you may be only the second or third person to come on this show and enlighten our audience like this. And it may be the title of your show. You may own the company, but those you serve are the boss. They're the ones in charge. They're the ones calling the shots. You're trying to serve their needs, fill their wants, not our wants.
And the reality is that if you think about it, by serving them to achieve what they want, you end up getting what you want anyways, right? So yeah, it's win-win-win for everybody,
Love
because you're
that.
serving your clients to get what your clients to give them what they want, right? Hence you're
Yep.
delivering your products and all that. And except you're running a company where everything is automated, you do need people to do the work. And employees have to come in and to make sure that they have high morale, the right atmosphere, the right culture, the right camaraderie to do stuff. You got to craft that. You got to make that happen, and it comes a lot of times with you being a servant leader to lead people. Obviously, there's some places where they have toxic environments where they thrive in that, but that's not for most people. Most people want to have sanity and calmness in where they work. And, it's your role as an entrepreneur to make sure that that happens.
When this goes out, your role as an so many hats that we wear as an entrepreneur. I may be considered an author, but I'm also in marketing, doing my financing. I'm not doing my emails, but I'm wearing all the hats. Well put there, Owen. But now I'd like to backtrack a bit. Let's talk about your business now. Let's let our audience know all things SweetProcess.
Okay, so SweetProcess in a nutshell is a software that makes it so that you can build a one single source of truth online where you and your employees can go find instructions at any given time on how to do any recurring task, right? So you can create procedures, processes, and policies on your work. Not only can you create them, but you can also continuously improve those documents over time, because the reality is as you do the work, there'll be more insight on improvements, and then you can have that go back to SweetProcess and improve them. And on top of that, it also acts like a task management software where not only have you spent the time to create these documents on how the work is done, but you're not doing that in a vacuum. You're doing that because you want people to actually get work done. So you can actually use our software to assign real work to people, knowing that when you assign work to them, they're never going to say, I don't know how the work is done. Because in order for you to assign a task to anybody in SweetProcess, the underlying procedure with the instructions on how to do that very work they're about to work on is right there in front of them. So that's in a nutshell what SweetProcess does. But I'm sure you want to know how we got started with SweetProcess, or if you have another question, I can go in
Of
another direction.
course, I think our listeners would love to know. Now they know what you offer, they know how you offer it, but maybe they want to know why you offer it. What was the leading factors that led you to become this entrepreneur? Well, in
So,
terms of
so
this company.
great question. So before SweetProcess started in the fourth quarter of 2013, and before that, I used to run an agency where I would provide entrepreneurs here in the US who have small to medium sized businesses with basically virtual assistant and back office staff who would do work for them. But these people were based in my facility in the Philippines. And what had happened was a lot of people had read these books like The 4 Hour Work Week, The World is Flat, and books that made them understand that, hey, being able to outsource work wasn't just limited to the big, multi-global companies where they would go and just hire like a seat of maybe 150 people at a time answering their phone calls. So they still do till today. You have like these phone companies where you call them and and in these days people have gotten so good that you can't even tell if you're speaking to someone in a different country. But what these books did back then was open people's minds to the fact that hey, it's not just the big companies that could do this.
Yes.
And so a lot of my competitors in the industry were focused on the big, the bigger guys, but I preferred to be more with the small to medium sized, entrepreneurs who needed that help. But one of the issues we ran into was a lot of them who were coming to us, they had this wrong preconceived notion because of what they probably read that hey, you're going to hire somebody from a different time zone, a different culture, who's going to work for you. It's not physically near you, but then they're going to deliver 100% how you do the work and it just be magic and rainbows just from the very beginning. So what we had to do was not only as part of the onboarding was to basically educate them that hey, in order for this person who's living in a different time zone, different culture and everything to do the work, right, there needs to be some form of training. And to train somebody properly, there needs to be you spend, investing the time with us on back then was Skype.
Skype.
Let's choose a specific recurring task that you want to delegate. Let's walk us through how the task is done. We record that session, and then behind the scenes, someone on my team will take that recording and turn that into an actual checklist, a standard operating procedure or procedure for short on how the work is done. But here was the issue I was facing was that back then the software for actually documenting these procedures and continuously improving them and collecting information from employees to make sure that you can keep improving. They were either enterprise level hard to use, or then we were basically hacking together a bunch of different tools who were not built for that purpose just to achieve that goal. So in the back of my mind, I was like, you know what, there has to be, this, if I have the time, look into building a software like this, because I actually came from a computer science background. That's what I studied in college. So I said, maybe when I have the time, I could do this. But then I went on this podcast, Mixergy. I don't know if you heard about it. Mixergy is the host is Andrew Warner, and he brought me on there to teach entrepreneurs based on what I was doing how to systematize their operations and basically pass on knowledge to their team and continuously
Yep.
improve those procedures. And so I did that interview. My co-founder Jervis, who's a programmer and my current CTO and co-founder at SweetProcess, listened to the podcast, reached out to me by email and said, hey, he loved what I was teaching and the framework I shared and all that he's trying to build an app similar to a lot of the things I was talking about, and he wanted my opinion and stuff. So, I was open to it and we had that conversation. And when we were done, I was like, dude, not only do I want to give advice, but are you open for us to actually build this together? He was excited and said, let's go ahead and do this. But I then told him, I said, you know what? One of the things I want to do is avoid the situation where our app ends up being as complex as these other enterprise level tools I'm trying to get my clients to use. Let us instead spend some more time to interview potential customers so that we can understand what are their root issues they're all experiencing when it comes to this whole thing of documenting procedures and stuff like that. So like when we build our software will first of all be easy to use, but mostly focus on those root issues that people are telling us. Mm-hmm. And so we all agreed to this, and then we had over I think more than 40 or so interviews with different people from different industries. We're able to get all that feedback and then use that as the basis for us to build our software. So we built the software, and jumping forward into the story, now we have over 2,000 or more companies using SweetProcess. It runs the gamut from basically state departments in the US using the software. You have what's it called? Churches using the software, hospitals using the software. I mean, you have doctors, and I mean, it runs the gamut, because the reality is that this problem is a horizontal problem in the sense that it's not a industry specific, because to scale any operations in any company, especially when you need to depend on people to do things and do them predictably the way you want them to be done, you do need to have these documents in place so that people can follow instructions, and that's what SweetProcess does.
It streamlines everything and makes things simple. If you can't get in touch with somebody, especially now post-pandemic, or I guess still in the pandemic that we're in, not everybody's in the office. Not everybody's at work. People are working from home. They may not be available. What do? You're wasting time if you can't figure out how to get that task done. Be sure to stick around to the end of the episode to find out how to find out more about SweetProcess, where to find more about Owen. He has a special offer he shared with me behind the scenes here before the show started that he's going to extend to you. Very generous offer, so be sure to stick around to the end of the show. But before we hop into the spotlight story, we're going to ask him for a little more advice. What are some of the more challenging areas of entrepreneurship for you, Owen?
So one of the challenging areas you would see is uh, basically trying to build a predictable way to get customers. And there's so many different things out there. People will tell you, do SEO, do cold calling, emails, do this, that, whatever. But I'll say, find what works for you. And once you find something that works for you, before you jump into the next thing, try to just I mean, I don't want to curse on this show, but like, go balls deep into it because you want to try as get as much traction as you can from that very method because jumping from one thing to the other because they might be shiny or new ideas it might look good, but to be honest it's more of dilution of your concentration. So if you find a channel that works for you to acquire these customers, just do everything you can to exhaust it completely before you start looking into other channels. And if you end up maybe say for some reason you want to try multiple channels, just put it down to like maybe three, something that is manageable, not too much, because there's always going to be something coming out. There's always going to be one new tactic, whatever. But regardless, have a firm strategy and just live by that and move forward on it. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to give it yourself the time for things to come to fruition. Everybody's impatient, trying to jump to, not everybody should say, many, they want success right away, but things take time. I've learned the hard way. I've been doing my company since 2015. Here we are, 2023. I feel like I'm still just getting started. 4 books later, the shows that are now probably, I don't know, 20,000 listens between the two of them. Things are moving in the right direction, but I have to stay true to the process, trust the process, and stick to it. More great advice there. I think now it is a perfect time to head into the spot. As I mentioned, we have an all-star internet entrepreneur on the show today. So I think that I found from the handbook would be go over, and this one is called from a $1 billion company that came away with nothing, and he's okay with it. I'm going to read some bullet points from it, and this article again is from the Entrepreneur's Handbook. When you see something funny and want to share it, you have a lot of options, whatever social media streaming platforms you use, maybe even LinkedIn if it's not too unprofessional, but as the article puts, at the very least, posting your entertaining content can make your friends chuckle. If you're lucky, it could go viral and give you 15 minutes of fame, but what have you done before social media and where would you have shared it? Josh Abrahamson has helped solve that problem. When he was a freshman in college, he and his best friend from high school launched a website called collegehumor.com. Many of you have to have heard of that because I have. People would send Josh their funny stories, pictures, and videos, and then he would put it on this site. We've moved past that kind of sharing content, but in the 90s, this was a different time in the internet. And Josh explains that promoting new websites relied on different types of marketing strategies. And in fact, he was just telling people about his website and a decidedly analog process. Quote, initially, I printed up a couple hundred flyers and went to every urinal in the boys' dorms and hunt them all around campus, put them by the urinals, and I could see pretty quickly all this traffic was being generated at our school. So then I drove to the other schools and did the same thing. I started finding people at different schools and I would send them a t-shirt in exchange for doing it at their school. So it was literally posting flyers or funny pictures in bathrooms. That was the initial marketing for College Humor. Now it says that moving to the cool kids table. College students, most of them accessing the internet for the very first time, had never seen anything like collegehumor.com before, and they quickly became obsessed. So it's an innovative idea here from Josh. The website's popularity exploded, and Josh and his co founder became mini celebrities on the campus, and he's described it as a surreal experience. But attention and wealth are two different things, he learned. That's an important lesson for every entrepreneur that needs to learn, particularly if they think entrepreneurship is about getting rich. Entrepreneurship isn't about getting rich. It's, as we spoke about before, it's about solving problems. In order to solve their problems, entrepreneurships and everybody involved, these companies need to make sure people with those problems know your solution does exist. And I want to share this quote here about generating some good revenue. People always ask if I dropped out of college. I always tell them I think they watched The Social Network too many times. You're mistaking the situation Mark Zuckerberg had with my situation, which was orders of magnitude different. We had a very small but cool business, and it wasn't like we were going to be millionaires. It was very, very much not like that. Now we're going to get into this making a bad exit on their feet, I hope, because the title of the article, excuse me. College Humor became one of the most popular sites, but as he found out, being popular was not a guarantee of long-term success. I need to stress that with everyone listening on. Times do change, people do change. We need to stay current. A few years after graduating and moving to New York for his business, Josh and his co-founders sold the company to a famed entrepreneur named Barry Diller and Interactive Corp, a huge media conglomerate that was looking to push into the digital entertainment space. Overly excited about the potential of what they built and how it can grow with the help of them, he agreed to a deal where that company acquired the company, but 51%. The rest was with Josh's team, giving them upside, or at least that's what they saw at the time. With upside comes downside, and here's something Josh did not consider. Quote, YouTube, Facebook, they all started around that time, and we were really facing an uphill battle of trying to build the next Comedy Central or the next big thing, which was too ambitious at the time. So it was a difficult place to be, to sell a business with this expectation that it's going to turn into something massive, and then it's not happening. He went on, as the story explains, just because he technically exited, the structure of the exit wasn't something that resulted in a private island or mojitos. It considered a gamble. He took some money off the table, but the terms of the deal also included staying with the company for 5 years. They turned out to be 5 years of frustration and struggle as College Humor's core business model of sharing other people's user-generated content got overtaken by social media companies that were letting people share their own content. And he says, worst of all, part of College Humor's IP, the IP that got sold to the company Interactive Corp, included a small, hardly known video hosting site called Vimeo. Yup, the same Vimeo that now a public company with a market cap that, at the time of this writing, puts in value for $6 billion. However, because Josh is no longer holding a controlling interest of that company, as I shared, it was only 49% they retained. You could probably guess how much money Josh saw from Vimeo. What do you take away from this write-up, Owen?
So without having the full context, because I don't know the entire situation, because there's probably a lot more, to that. But I will say the very first thing that stood out to me was, you know, how far did he go with that channel he found for getting customers? I mean, did he stop at a certain point, or did he try to exhaust that thing until there was no more? Because the reality is, I find that if you have that dedication to that one channel and you have that thing working like crazy, then it's easier to go find some money or whatever to invest in it, because they can now basically think of it from the perspective of the investor. You go meet an investor where you're trying to bring money into your company, and you don't really have a channel that you have all the metrics and you know exactly how well it's working, right? Versus somebody who has that channel working very well, it's really pumping without the investment. Now I'm just going to throw my money. It's like throwing a light into gasoline, right? So that's one thing. So I'm wondering how much of each understanding of his channel, how it worked, where was he at that point before he got the investment, right? The second part too now is the controlling, giving up so much control. Because first of all, when you give up so much control, first of all, again, when you bring on somebody as an investor into your company, you're kind of married to this new person, right? And you gotta weigh decisions back and forth with them. But now, on top of that, if they have more control, that even makes things even worse, because you basically become an employee in a company that you started, now with less motivation to even try to do anything, because you don't even have the control you need. And even more frustration, because when you get ideas on how to implement new stuff, you cannot do it because you got to go through this red tape to get it approved by somebody who came in as an investor who has now more control than you. So all those dynamics all put together, I feel like, was the recipe. I'm saying I don't have the full context, but just hearing this snippet of the story, that's what's standing out to me. It was, don't give away too much control, retain the most control, number one. And number two, before you go seek investments, make sure that you have that channel for getting customers and so on and so forth that is dialed down, that if you bring money into it, it's literally lighting a match on gasoline. That's what you're needing the money for, and that will help you even retain more control, even after you've gotten the money.
That was my big takeaway as well, giving up, over 50%, where they said their core missions of what the company was doing was all gone because they didn't have a say.
A lot
Maybe.
of times too is that the reason why an investor would want that kind of control is because they realize that they are going to come in and try to learn a lot of things and make a lot of things, like do a lot of experiments to see what channels or what things are going to move the company forward, what traction elements are going to move the company forward. So that's why they feel like they want more control. Versus if you already have all that figured out already, and they're basically giving you money to light a match on your gasoline, they don't have to worry about that. So they know something's working the way it should work. They can see all the data that is pumping. Then they don't even really need that much control. You get what I'm saying? So that's why it brought me to the fact that I'm thinking that they didn't have that channel working the way they wanted, and that's why they had to give so much control.
And now the byproduct of that company, Vimeo, worth $6 billion. And because he sold that controlling interest, he didn't have any opportunities to enjoy the incentives. So everyone out there, if you were thinking of exiting, think long and hard if giving up controlling interest is the right move for you. It may be for some, it may not be for others, but we had an incredible analysis from our guest there. Thank you, Owen. Let's hop back to you. If you could recommend one book, workshop, or tool to our community of entrepreneurs, what are you going to recommend?
So I don't know the exact name of the author, but the book is called The Goal, uh, GOAL. And so basically, the whole idea of the book is being able to identify bottlenecks and constraints in your business. Now, not only being able to identify them, but being able to figure out how to fix them or remove them. And realizing this whole thing, it's a continuous improvement thing. Because even after you've removed the bottleneck, there's going to be, as you grow and scale the business, there's going to be a whole new bottleneck that you will experience. And so that's, reading that book's a good place to start. But if you want, love to share a quick framework on how entrepreneurs can document procedures at their company. So first of all, you're listening to this right now. Maybe you have some tasks that are, a lot of bottlenecks, and you're not having employees do the work the way you want it. So now you've realized that, okay, you need to start documenting procedures. And the thing is, where do you start? So the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is to determine which tasks are those recurring tasks that you do on an ongoing basis. Because honestly, if it's a task that is a one-time thing, you don't need to document it, right? So that's like a project, a one-time thing. But if it's a recurring task, now you have a bucket of recurring tasks. Now, in that bucket, before you start documenting anything, I want you to ask yourself, which tasks should I eliminate? Because you don't want to just document everything, and we don't want to just document tasks or keep doing things just because it's the way you've always done it. So there's going to be a process of elimination. Once you're done, you're left with those required recurring tasks that you cannot eliminate, right? Now, in that bucket of required recurring tasks that you cannot eliminate, there's two forms. There's one that is the income generating task, the marketing and sales, the ones that everybody's all excited about because that's how you bring in customers, right? And then the other one is more of the production side of work, how you deliver the results to your customers, right? But people might, when they want to start documenting, they might say, oh, let's start with the income generating one. But I say, don't do that yet, because guess what? If you do that and you're successfully able to document all that, you'll be tempted to go bring in more employees to take over those tasks so you can get more customers. Guess what? Now, once those more customers come in, they're going to come into the bottleneck on the production side, which is going to mean more people to be angered, to be annoyed by the fact that you're not able to deliver. So that's why I say focus on those production side of things first. Now, how do you identify what tasks in the production side of things to work on first? Look at what is the one that is the biggest bottleneck of your time, the one that is the most annoying, where anytime it comes up, it just gives you a headache. The one where every time when people want to work on the task, they don't have the right information. They're always scattering looking for information. And the one where if you leave, everything breaks down. But that's an identification of which one you should start with. So you focus on that. How do you now document the task? I say the best way to document the task is when you want to work on the task, because then your mind is in the right frame of mind to basically put the information together. The next question will be probably asking is how much information should go into it. So what you want to do first of all is install in the minds of all your employees that this is going to be a continuous improvement, because we're going to start from version 0 and keep improving over and over and over again, because that's how we're going to do this. So at the time you're about to work on this task that we have identified as a bottleneck, the first thing you got to do is write down the title of the task. The title should be something that anybody in your company sees the title, they know exactly what they can accomplish, or how to do whatever. And then how many steps of the task as you're doing the work. So if you are working on a 10-step task, by the time you're done, you would have what I call a minimum viable procedure, which is just a fancy way of saying a procedure that has a title, the procedure and title of each of the steps. But guess what? No details is filled in just yet. So that's the first version, the outline. Now, how do you get from an outline to some details filled in? This is where you now solicit the feedback and cooperation of your managers and your employees on the ground. Say, hey, every time you're about to do this task, have this document right there in front of you, because your job is to make sure that when you're doing the task, just go in there and add in some snippet of text. It doesn't have to be an encyclopedia or anything, just some additional information there. It could be text, it could be a screenshot, it could even be a very small video for that very step. Just let's keep adding some more things in there while you're doing the work. So when they do that, they will obviously need to get approval from you once they've filled out some information. Once you see that stuff, you see what they've added. If you like it, you approve it. Now this is a new version of the document. So each time they are working on a task, their job is to go through, have that thing in front of them and go through it, make sure it's correct. And then what's going to happen is as they're working and doing work, they're going to come across moments of insight where they, oh, I think we don't need this 10 steps anymore. We maybe need just 8 steps, because, you know, they get more insight while they're working, right? So they pass on that back to you, and you just have to make sure that your eyes are on this document to keep improvement. So now you've done the first biggest bottleneck. Now you identify the next one. You do that same dance, and before you know, you started gradually moving from one bottleneck to next on the production side of things. And for the most part, now let's assume you've documented most of them. Now you can start paying attention to those income generating tasks and do the same dance on there, always starting from the minimum viable procedure, like I mentioned, and working with your team to build that together. And so once you have those things documented, you can now start even hiring employees to take over the task, because they know they can come in and do these marketing and sales generating tasks, knowing that production is covered because you've documented how the work is done, and you can always get people to come in and take over and even increase your production capacity if you want to. Now, how can you get people more involved in this? Hey, not only do you install in them the mindset of continuous improvement and do the strategy I shared earlier, but you also might want to incentivize them, because, hey, they're getting paid to do a specific task. Now you're telling them to go ahead and document procedures. Why don't you include as part of the incentive that they are incentivized, paid or whatever, to document and improve to improve the documents? That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is whenever they have any question on how a specific task is, you can say, hey, don't come and ask me a question. Go check SweetProcess. As me using SweetProcess as a software for that, and say, hey, go check SweetProcess. So people now know that, consciously, after weeks of anytime they go meet the manager or come to meet you and ask you for something, they're supposed to check SweetProcess. That now becomes a thing that's installed in their mind ahead. I'm not going to meet my manager for how work is done. I got to go check SweetProcess first. Now they start doing that. They start looking at SweetProcess. They start seeing all the software, the documentation, and they start seeing all their colleagues chiming in, their colleagues improving documents, and those documents getting approved. So they will always, in their mind, be like, well, if my colleagues are doing this, I might as well get involved in this too, because I want my say on how I do my work to impact the work that I'm actually doing, because I can share my feedback. I can improve these documents too. So they get incentivized to do that as well. So they have to improve the documents just because they're seeing their colleagues doing it. They get part to do it. Now you might also say, okay, I get all this, I buy into all this, but what if I don't have my employees don't have the time, and even incentivizing them will make sense? You can always hire what we call process consultants. They are people who their whole entire job is to come into your company, look through your company, the systems, figure out what needs to be eliminated, and then for things that need to be improved and documented, they can help you and use like a software like SweetProcess and go through document procedures and processes for how your work is done. So on the final thing I can leave on with you is the whole thing of you can have a procedure on how to document procedure, and it could just be a simple procedure that says, okay, when you're creating a procedure, this is how you keep the title, this is how you keep the steps, this is how much information I want you to put into each step, and that way they have some guidelines on how they actually document procedures. So I hope that framework that I shared and all these tips, gives people, some means to get started. And if you want, Vincent, I can share the offer so that I know we're running out of time very soon. So yeah, so I've given you all these tips and strategy. And what I want to offer you is we do have by default, if you go to our website, a 14-day trial. But just because you've listened to this awesome interview so far, I want to give you an incentive. So yes, you can go to our website. I'll give you the link verse and get additional trial time. So instead of the 14-day default, you get an extended 28-day trial. And to get that, you go to sweetprocess.com/that entrepreneur show. Just type it all together. Again, it's sweet like candy, process like process.com/that entrepreneur show. Again, sweetprocess.com/that entrepreneur show. That's where you get it from.
All right.
Thanks, Vincent.
What a generous offer, everyone out there. Even if your company is not quite there yet, like mine, right on the cusp, all this information is great to already know, great to possess, because when the time's right, you know where exactly to go. That's sweetprocess.com. Oh, and it's been a great show. Thank you for reaching out and joining the show. But before we go, real quick, which entrepreneur would you choose to learn from throughout history if you can expand your horizons with?
That's a good question. Throughout history. I wasn't ready for this one, but one of the things I give you a framework on how I learn these days is that if I have something that I'm working on, I tend to look for podcasts to learn from, because the reason why is books, which are like telling stories of how someone did something, they're great, but for a large extent, they tend to tell you about the past. So I tend these days, if I'm trying to learn something I want to do now, to look for a podcast where they're talking about that specific topic, because the person who comes in as a guest is not necessarily going to tell you everything they're doing, but they kind of give, so success leaves clues, so they can leave some clues and hints as to what is working for them right now on whatever thing I'm trying to learn. So once I identify the person who I want to learn from, identify the podcast, then I try to find where all the other podcasts this guy has gone to, because they shared some great insight. And then I try to get like maybe 10 or so of them and listen to them. And then I begin to pick out, okay, he said this on this podcast, he said that on no other podcast. And now he's kind of giving you the gems on all the things he's doing in real time, right?
I love that choice. And thank you again for hopping on the show, Owen. And to everyone listening on, thank you for continuing to support the show and tuning in. You can learn more about me at Vincent A. Lancy on YouTube and all social media. And the show is at That Entrepreneur Show on all platforms. And until next week, stay safe, and I hope you enjoy your weeks. I'm signing off.